will recover. They're particularly resilient to disturbances, and as long as there aren't other effects like contaminants or something like that, then we would expect these communities to recover quite quickly.
What about low tide marks, high tide marks?
Yes, well, the old low tide mark is now going to be the high tide mark, and so what will happen is that gradually those communities will change, so they'll become new habitats, and the low tide will move downwards. There'll be lots of new environments to share and to look at. We've got more beach. It might be a bit further away, but we've got more land, and the sea creatures will survive further down, and we'll be able to have the birds will have more places to roost on the rocks, and hopefully once the earthquakes have sort of receded a bit and the aftershocks have gone, it'll be safe for people to be walking on the beach at Kaikōura and really enjoying the wonderful marine life, which will still be there sort of when the tourists come back in a very short time.
You're painting a very encouraging picture for us to end on today. So you are optimistic about the future of that part of the coast. What about also all the sediment that's come down? Will this protect the coastline or parts of it?
The sediment, we don't really understand too much about the effects of the sediment, but at the moment there's quite high sediment load, and this could be affecting the shellfish especially. I think that I'm not sure. I think you probably need to ask a sedimentologist a bit about the effects, but certainly that sediment might be a problem and will affect many of these marine animals that are used to open coastal waters. So for the power, for example, it's important not to collect them at the moment until they have cleared this or any other contaminants. And for the power anyway, the mid-tide habitat may well have been modified, and that's where the young power will want to be settling. And so hopefully there will be suitable places for the power to settle as the communities change.
Yeah, I understand, but essentially you're quite optimistic about the rehabilitation of the fishery and business as usual offshore resuming quite near Kaikōura.
Yes, I am. I think that marine organisms, especially along these sorts of coasts, are pretty resilient. And in a short while, they will recover. And hopefully there's sufficient subtidal resources to be able to replenish those intertidal habitats. And there's going to be wonderful places to look at in Kaikōura where we'll be able to see New Zealand as it was previously. There'll be animals and organisms that we've not seen, that people have not been able to see for a while. We'll be able to see those at Kaikōura and make it a ever more special place than it currently is.
Professor Isla Marsden, thank you. What an encouraging report from you.
Nature is very adaptable. I love it.
Yeah, that's Professor Isla Marsden.
I like that when she said there'll be more beach and it'll be further away, but it'll be lovely for a walk. I'm in.
Maybe people come to the South Island from the North Island. They could start in Collingwood and then trip down to Kaikōura.
Yes,
wonderful way to have your Christmas holiday.
Don't start your Collingwood plan again. Chris Clark has been on the panel. Thank you, Chris.
A pleasure, Jim.
And Michelle Acorn, you enjoy tonight.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
Yeah, and the anniversary as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We're back tomorrow with the panel and Checkpoint with John Campbell coming right up.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, the owner of the condemned Wellington building, 61 Molesworth Street, speaks out. Prime Property is currently under investigation by MB, but its chief executive says his company did not cause the earthquake and it was doing people a favour by allowing them to live in a commercial building. That's coming up. Also tonight, business owners react to news. It will be at least a week before that inland road and therefore lifeline opens to the general public, getting people in and out of Kaikōura. We travel the road with 31 army trucks bringing in fuel and other essential supplies. Fascinating track on that. Plus, the government announces a sell-off of more than a third of its Housing New Zealand properties in Christchurch. All of that and much more after the news at 5.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Prime Minister says fear is starting to set in Kaikōura as the enormity of the situation hits home. John Campbell made a flying visit to the quake-hit area today to further assess damage and recovery efforts. He says there's been some noticeable progress in clearing roads and slips, but the scale of the challenge ahead is daunting for some. Mr Key says there is a general fear about the long recovery, particularly for power divers, who are expecting it to take 5 or 6 years for stocks to replenish. Kaikōura Civil Defence is warning that the inland route to the cut-off town might not be open to the public for weeks. The Civil Defence Controller made the warning at the daily public briefing at the town's Memorial Hall earlier this afternoon. The largest army convoy so far of 32 trucks transported vital food and fuel supplies over the inland road from Culverden today. But Murray Sinclair says there's still no date for full public access to the road.
We're working to try and get it so the in and out with the four-wheel drive vehicles become more frequent. But as though we've just got to try to work our way through that. I can't give you a time frame when that might happen. It could be next week, could be a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, but we are fully aware of your situation.
Murray Sinclair also warned there is no program for reopening State Highway 1 from the south, and that could take months. An inmate who pinched a prison guard's bottom is the first to be sentenced for a third strike offence since the controversial law passed 6 years ago. Justice Toogood today sentenced Raven Casey Campbell to the maximum 7 years for indecently assaulting the woman guard. But the judge did not impose parole, as Edward Gay reports from the Hamilton High Court.
Campbell had already received strike warnings for robbery and aggravated robbery. While at Waikeria prison, he pinched the bottom of a prison guard, constituting a third strike offence. Under the law, a judge must send a third strike offender to prison for the maximum term without parole, unless it's manifestly unjust. Justice Toogood said the 25-year-old had been impulsive and foolish, had pleaded guilty and was remorseful for what he had done. He said he found it harsh to sentence Campbell to the maximum 7 years, but he had no option because that was the law. But the judge said to sentence him without parole would be manifestly unjust. Ko Edward Gay aho.
The Māori and Mana parties have formally agreed to develop their relationship ahead of next year's general election. The executives of both parties met in Whangarei today to discuss their future after they put their differences behind them in July. The Mana leader, Hone Harawira, was a former Māori Party MP, but left the party after he was suspended from the caucus for ill discipline in 2011. The Māori Party president, Tuko Ruirangi Morgan, says they'll now focus on developing Māori politics and doing what is best for Māori. The police say they have no idea who the mother of a dead baby left in a South Auckland reserve is and are urging her to come forward. The body was found at about 8:30 this morning by a man walking his dog through the reserve on Mona Avenue in the suburb of Mangere Bridge. Detective Senior Sergeant Karen Bright says the baby appeared to have been born recently.
Our priority right now is appealing to locate the baby's mother. We're really concerned for her well-being, and we want to get her support and medical treatment. And for that reason, we ask that she contact us. She can contact any police station and she can speak to us in confidence.
Karen Bright says police have been making inquiries in the local area and a post-mortem will be done tomorrow. It's 5:04. To sport and suspension, injury and form have forced the All Blacks coach Steve Hansen to make several changes to his side for the final test of the year against France in Paris on Sunday morning. Rugby reporter Joe Porter has more.
Steve Hansen has picked arguably his best possible side with the players available, making 2 changes in the forward pack from last weekend's win over Ireland. Jerome Kainoa returns at blindside in place of Liam Squire, while Matt Todd is at open side in place of the injured Sam Cane. TJ Perenata's strong form has helped him oust Aaron Smith at halfback, while Ryan Crotty returns from injury to play at second 5 and Anton Leonard-Brown shifts to centre in place of the suspended Malakai Fekitoa. With Ben Smith out injured, Israel Dag moves from wing to fullback and Waisake Naholo comes on to the right wing. This is Joe Porter.
Meanwhile, the All Blacks major sponsor Adidas has apologised after an embarrassing blunder when it confused Malakai Fekitoa with Julian Savia in a promotional video. The video posted on social media is centred around Savia but actually shows game footage of Fekitoa. Injury has ruled Black Caps bowler Trent Boult out of tomorrow's test against Pakistan in Hamilton. He's been replaced by Doug Bracewell. And the New Zealand golfers Danny Lee and Ryan Fox have made a poor start to the World Cup of Golf Teams event in Melbourne. They're 4 over par after 9 holes to sit 26th in the 28-nation field. That's the news.
Safety concerns overblown.
The plaster that was put in the cracks last time has cracked again.
Caution criticised.
We've been driving these roads ever since this happened between here and Mount Lyford without a problem, as long as you had a high clearance four-wheel drive.
Decisions under fire.
We found a tiny slip with a tiny dam with a tiny pool.
Picking up the pieces, morning report weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, raising the youth justice age. Why New Zealand is fast becoming the last country standing on sending youth to prison. So what's the hold-up? And after 10, Who Graphica? Ridiculous facts about the alien Time Lord and how close the Doctor has come to predicting future scientific discoveries. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taumaranui, including the central high country, cloudy periods, showers developing overnight, turning to rain tomorrow morning with some heavy falls possible, clearing in the afternoon. Bay of Plenty, showers developing tomorrow morning, turning to rain in the afternoon, then gradually clearing. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy tomorrow with a few spots of rain. Taranaki to Wellington also whited up in Nelson and Marlborough, mostly cloudy. A period of rain around midday tomorrow, showers in North Island areas in the evening. Bulla to Fiordland, occasional rain becoming persistent tomorrow with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Canterbury and Otago, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle. A period of scattered rain tomorrow morning, then mostly fine. Southland, scattered rain, clearing, then returning for a time tomorrow morning. In the Chatham Islands, cloud increasing, rain developing tomorrow afternoon. It's just gone 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Coming up on Checkpoint, 31 army trucks roll into Kaikōura. Our reporter is on one of them. How are businesses in the town coping? We asked them. But first, the latest on Wellington's building. Staff are out of the biggest office block in the city for 2 weeks. That's next. But as the Wellington City Council and the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment look into whether the earthquake-damaged office building on Wellington's Molesworth Street, number 61, was being unlawfully used for residential purposes, the property's owner has given his first interview about the building and its tenants. Now, initial demolition work has begun there this afternoon. When the earthquake hit, an unknown number of people were living in 61 Molesworth Street. Checkpoint has spoken to a family who was living there in office space and have been unable to return to collect their possessions. They were not insured and they appear to have not been covered by building insurance. They've lost everything they own. We've tried repeatedly to get someone from Prime Property to talk to us about who was living in the building and why they were there. This morning we did get hold of Eyal Aharoni, the company's CEO. At first he declined to be interviewed, but he kept talking. After we told him we were recording, this is what he said.
I'm advised by my solicitors that I can't talk about this matter, but I will just say one little thing. The earthquake hasn't been caused by us. The building was not at risk, and it is unfortunate that people have been suffered loss and lost their property, may have lost their property, but this has got nothing to do with the fact that they have been living. This family has been living in a commercial property.
There were other families too, weren't there? Were there as many as 200 people living in what should have been office spaces?
These numbers are, I don't know where you got those numbers, John, they're incorrect. There was a very small number of people living in Molesworth Street, and I'm not actually clear that it was illegal. My lawyers are currently checking the information, but this building was not earthquake prone.
When you say you're not actually clear, you're a property owner and developer. You're very good at it. I understand you have a large portfolio. You absolutely must know the difference between commercial and residential property. They didn't have an attached bathroom specifically for their use. The shower was a general purpose shower downstairs. I mean, you know know this is not within the rules that the Wellington City Council operate for residential properties in their city.
John, you're not interviewing me.
Well, I am.
John, you're interviewing yourself. Okay. All right.
Well, I'd like.
John,
the problem is.
Excuse me, John.
Answer my questions, and then it will be an interview.
John, you're asking a question. You need to listen to the answers.
Okay.
We're checking the facts at the moment. The building actually was legally to be occupied by 1,000 office workers. Okay, we didn't put any person at risk, and there was some mistakes that may have been done that we are checking through the system at the moment. That number that you just mentioned, 200 people or whatever, it's completely incorrect. There was a very small number of people, which I actually don't know the number. Okay.
Okay, Jamie Meyer. I got the 200 from Jamie Meyer, who sent a text to Olive saying, and I quote, "Where should I put you, Olive? It's not the only building that has damage. You should be lucky you have Kalina Terrace as an option. I have 200 other people at Hotel St George."
That's right, but this is Hotel St George. This is a different property. That is a different property that is a residential property.
Okay, so they were already there. They hadn't been moved in there from other buildings.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Jamie is looking after many other properties, which are residential properties. And I just want to tell you that at the time of the earthquake, the other building that you mentioned, 142 Wakefield Street, had no one in the building.
Okay, so you are absolutely emphatic there was no one living in 142 Wakefield Street.
At the time, the building at the time of the earthquake was completely empty.
There had been people living there, though, hadn't there? And
earlier they may have been a small number of people, but they have been asked to leave quite a few weeks before the earthquake. They have been vacated.
How often have you or Prime put people in office space and charged them rent for residential accommodation? How many times have you done this? Is this something that you've routinely done at Prime?
No, John. This is this only happened in this occasion.
What? But it had happened previously at Wakefield Street, hadn't it?
John, I need to double check those items. It may have happened in Wakefield Street. I can't confirm that, but definitely Wakefield Street was.
And how many people were in Molesworth, 61 Molesworth? How many people did you have living there in office space?
I need to check that, but very few people.
When you say very few, if you're able to tell me very few, you're able to tell me a number, surely.
It wouldn't be more than 4 or 5 people.
Right. Well, Olive and Ernest were there with their 2 children, so that's 4. So are you saying there is no one else living in that building when the earthquake happened at all? No one else at all?
John, we are checking those. We are checking that, but there may have been another 1 or 2 people living in the building. Maybe, I'm not sure. We are checking those facts. And just one thing that you forgot to mention earlier, that Olive and Ernst has been requested. You know, my manager Jamie has done them a favor because they wanted to stay in the Thorndon area for the school. Okay, and unbeknown to us, we didn't know about it. He's done them a favor. He put them in that very large space, which is about 5,000 square feet, and charge them very little for it. Charge them $300 a week for a large area, which includes power. And I'm pretty sure they enjoy that occupation very much.
They'd been given 90 days notice, hadn't they, EL? So they were living in that building because there was nowhere else for them to go. They had previously been in another one of your properties That property had to be vacated because of water damage. They went into 61 Molesworth Street, which was office space. Now, let's not get carried away with the philanthropy of accommodating people who had been living in one of your residential properties in office space, empty office space, with a toilet down the stairway, the exit out the back, and a shower on a different floor. I mean, you know, this is pretty basic stuff, Eyal, and they had been given 90 days notice there.
John, once again, you're interviewing yourself and not me, okay? We did not need to provide the family accommodation. We were trying to help them. The easiest way for us was to tell them, sorry.
Eyal, you had a tenancy agreement with them. You had an existing binding tenancy agreement with them that you had signed with them. They were in a property that was manifestly ill-equipped, not fit for purpose because of water damage and leakage. You moved them into office space. You had a tenancy agreement with them. You had a contract with them.
John, once again, you are not interviewing, but you're putting your own opinion, okay? We were trying to help them. We took them, I mean, not me, my manager, without our knowledge, offered them a luxury apartment in Oriental Bay, okay, at the same rate, okay? And they declined to take it, but they were quite happy to take a very, very cheap option.
Yeah, can you just, sorry, okay, that sounds great. The luxury apartment in Oriental Bay. Can you tell me what the rent would have been if they had stayed there? Can you, because I'd like to hear it from you. How much would they have had to have paid for that luxury apartment in Oriental Bay? Because I know the figure, Eyal, but I'd like to hear it from you.
The rent that the manager offered them at the luxury apartment was the same rate they paid in the previous apartment, which was $570 a week, which was a very modest figure for that apartment.
That was for the first 3 months, wasn't it? And then it went up after that, didn't it, Eyal?
It never gone that way. And it was only a temporary option for them until they can find another accommodation. So he, out of his generosity, put them into Molesworth Street. He helps them. He paid for the delivery of the relocation of the goods. He took them to the supermarket in his car. He accommodated them. They paid a fraction of the rent that they would have paid otherwise. And it was only a temporary solution until they can find another place to go. And when they started to feel comfortable and didn't really want to go, he had no option but give them a notice to leave. And under the Act, he can only give them a notice for 90 days. But it was 1 month prior to the earthquake.
So at first he was motivated by kindness and concern for their well-being, and he put them in office space, but then he didn't want them in the office space any longer, so obviously his concern for their well-being lapsed and he gave them 90 days notice. That's confusing, isn't it, Eyal? Can you see how you might be confused by those two different...
John, you're very good at interviewing yourself. You're talking to me, you need to listen to what I say, and don't put words in my mouth.
No, I'm not. I'm praising what you're saying to me.
Yes, you are, John, and I hope...
So either Jamie had given them accommodation...
John, when you record my words, I hope that you won't manipulate it and record it in a very selective way.
No,
okay?
I don't do that. That's not what I do.
Well, let's hope, okay? He gave them a temporary option so they can find themselves another place to go. He was just trying to help them. And they simply didn't go. Nobody was forcing them. Okay, in your view, the apartment was uncomfortable. You have to go down to the shower, 1 floor to the shower. Okay, there's many houses that you have to go down 1 floor to the shower. I agree. It's not the best way to live. But we're not in Russia here. We haven't forced them to stay there. They could have left any time they wanted. And then when they refused to leave, he gave them a notice to leave.
They had a tenancy agreement with you, didn't they? They had accommodation. They had moved into that accommodation. That accommodation had water damage and leaked. They had a tenancy agreement with you. The alternative that they were offered was an apartment in Oriental Bay, which was going to be $570 for 3 months and then $1,200 a week from that point on, which clearly Olive and Ernest simply couldn't afford.
I'm not sure where you got those numbers.
Well, I got those numbers from Olive and Ernest. Then,
Olive and Ernest.
And from Jamie. And then then we find ourselves in a situation where they are in an office building which is not zoned residential, which is not meant to have people living in it, where their belongings still are. They can't get their belongings. You have offered them no insurance coverage. They are completely out of pocket. They are bereft. They have lost everything they have. And the buck seems not to stop with you in any way, Ial.
John, you're manipulating once again. We are not responsible for the earthquake. The City Council took over the control of the property. Anyway, I think I've said enough. It's quite long. I think if people will start to get bored if you have to listen to such a long conversation, John. And I've already, my lawyer's going to be pretty upset with me for talking for so long. So I think we have to finish at that point, eh?
One final question before you go. Have you ever previously been prosecuted, or Prime Property ever previously been prosecuted by the Wellington City Council or any branch of it?
Yes, Prime Property once, I'm trying to remember, but once there was a prosecution against us for some breach, some vegetation or something, some earthworks that was done, a minor thing, or maybe not minor. There was one prosecution against us for some earthworks. Yeah.
Just one?
As far as I remember, we've been in the business for 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the investigation into the people living in 61 Molesworth Street, which is being conducted both by IMBI and by the Wellington City Council, what are you going to say to explain why there were people in that building when they should not have been living there?
I will say what I want to say to the investigators.
Ial Aharoni, the CEO of Prime Property. We're getting feedback about people living in Wakefield Street. We will check up on that and report back. Meanwhile, 2,000 IRD workers have been told they will not be back in the city's largest office building, the Asteron Centre, for at least 2 weeks. That news means that 1 in 5 of Wellington's public servants have been displaced by building damage suffered in the quakes during the past week and a half. 1 in 5 workers. And Wellington City Council has just said it will demolish 3 of its own buildings which sustained quake damage with Wellington's buildings and their state of health. Here's Adam Bennett.
The 6-year-old Asteron Centre near the railway station is the largest office block in Wellington. It was given the all-clear by the owner's engineers shortly after the quake. But this IRD worker says she and her colleagues noticed some damage on their return.
When we got back to work, the lifts weren't working that well, so a lot of us were encouraged to take the stairs, and on the way up through the stairs we noticed the cracks, mainly isolated around levels 5 and 6.
IRD commissioned its own engineering report and yesterday ordered its staff out of the building because of safety concerns about the stairwell. A spokesman says further information from the engineers means that remedial work is required and will take 2 weeks. Building owner Mark Denichik said last night that the safety concerns had been overblown, but this afternoon he said he wouldn't challenge the work done by the IRD's engineers.
Absolutely not. We have 2 professional people and they have an opposing opinion, and it is an absolute waste of time to indulge in an academic argument. My focus is absolutely on doing some remedial work, on which I spent most of this today, and we probably will start with the active work tomorrow morning.
Mr. Denichik did challenge the 2-week minimum time frame set out by the IRD.
I think they should have asked me. So the answer is how quick I can get other people cooperating with my normal engineering company, which is Bittridge.
IRD has limited capacity for its staff to work remotely. The worker RNZ spoke to says she is now on paid leave for 2 weeks. The 2,000 IRD workers moved out of the Asteron Centre, along with staff from the Civil Aviation Authority and Callaghan Innovation, add to 2,000 other public servants previously displaced by quake damage. This afternoon, Wellington City Council says 3 of its own buildings will be demolished. 2 are on land between Cable Street and Wakefield Street, and the other is the council-owned St John's Church in Karori. They had been targeted for demolition anyway, but the work will now be brought forward. For Checkpoint, this is Adam Bennett.
Let's go to Kaikōura now, where the Prime Minister says fear is starting to set in as it becomes apparent how long it's likely to take to recover from the earthquakes in something resembling fullness. John Key made a flying visit to the area today to further assess damage and recovery efforts.
I was here about a week ago, and you can certainly see roads being cleared, slips being cleaned up. Generally, I'd say people are in good mental space. They're feeling still quite confident and that they're getting a fair bit of support. But as is always the case, the enormity of the challenge starts sinking in. There's quite a big impact on people's sort of just general fear about what might take place next. I mean, some of these people are in for a very long haul. If you take the power divers, they're talking about potentially having 5 or 6 years where it's quite a reduced amount of activity. You can see people who are already starting to battle with their insurance companies. There's all those kinds of things, and then the aftershocks will always have sort of an emotional impact on people. So it's definitely progress forward, but I think you'd have to say that people are realistic that there's a lot more to be done, and still quite a bit we don't know.
Remember, the government's support package is initially for 8 weeks. It may well be extended. John Key also says the government will help market the area, getting tourists to go back once it reopens for business. But Civil Defence says it will be at least a week and perhaps up to 3 weeks before that inland road opens. And with it closed, Kaikōura is a tourist town with no tourists. This morning at 6:30, a convoy of New Zealand Defence Force vehicles set off from Kelvedon to take the inland road to the town. The road is damaged, vulnerable to aftershocks and bad weather, and still under threat of rock falls from above. But our reporter Maya Burry went in with the Army. I spoke to her about 6.5 hours later when she arrived in Kaikōura, and I asked her about the Army's cargo.
They were bringing a whole range of things. I saw them being loaded up before 6:30 this morning when I was in Kelvedon. Portaloos, fuel. Oh, you can see some gas bottles just coming along there behind me in a truck. So yeah, gas bottles as well. Apparently gas has been there's been a real shortage in Kaikōura. People need it to cook. So that's been coming in today. But of course fuel was the big one, and that was what was in the truck that I was in. They were carrying a petrol pump, and that was destined for Caltex because, as we've heard, there's been real issues with fuel supplies and things like that. So, yeah, that was really a priority.
Maya, 31 trucks, and were there times on that road where you were basically stationary as you waited truck by truck to go round obstacles?
Yeah, we were, and because these trucks are so heavy, you can only go over a bridge one at a time. So, we would be backed up for quite a long time waiting to go over bridges, going through a gorge at one stage. So, yeah, it did take a wee while.
And Maya, looking up, are there bits where you look up and still see large and slightly scary rock overhangs and potential falls above the road as you go through?
Yeah, there were a few moments I felt a bit nervous, going over bridges and things like that. You always have that slight sense of anxiety, I guess. But yeah, you could see also, large rocks just hanging above the cliffs, kind of looming over you at some points. And I guess that's why the Defence Force at the moment have a policy where they don't stop unless they really have to. So, you keep going, and I guess you hope for the best.
And we look at the trucks behind you, and they are impressive all-terrain vehicles. The family wagon is not going to be able to go over this road at all for quite some time, right?
No, I was talking to some of the guys who were driving me today, and I said to them, I've got a Suzuki Swift at home, do you reckon it would do the trick? And they told me not to bother.
1 to 3 weeks before a car like a Suzuki Swift will make it along that road at best. More from Maya later as she takes us in on the journey and describes what it is like. So crucial to the town's future, obviously, that inland route. But which businesses are open in Kaikōura as we speak and which aren't? Sally Murphy went for a look.
So this is Kaikōura's main street. It doesn't stretch too far up the road, but it's usually where all the tourist buses come here and drop off the tourists, which is what all of these businesses rely on. And as you can see, most of them here are all shut. But across the road in the main car park, there's actually a wee coffee shop which is set up, and it's offering free coffee to anyone who comes along. Barista Sharon Rayner says they've been run off their feet. So what are you guys doing today?
Today what we're doing, we've been getting donations of coffee beans and milk from the Army. The Army's been coming in and filling up the tank, and we're just trying to keep people happy, a bit of normality, you know, get them a coffee in the morning, and there's been quite a few grins around, so yeah, no, we've got all donations from tampons to alcohol, so yeah, no, it's been really nice feeding the people that are here to help.
This is the only pub that's open along the main street at the moment, called the Whaler, and it's become quite the meeting place where all the locals have been having their community meetings. Wayne Scott runs West End Clothing, which has been on the main street for 70 years.
We opened Monday, yesterday. We have been open 2 hours a day before that, just for essential clothing services, just to help people out if they want clothes, you know. When it rained, we opened that day in case they want a jacket. So we're doing our best to keep people happy.
As you can see behind me, a big part of the main street's actually been fenced off. There's huge cracks in the concrete of the front of these shops, so they've put these wooden pillars up to support the facades of the buildings. But as you can see behind me, the town's only chemist is actually open for business because they're providing essential medical services. Pharmacist Dave McKee had to get emergency drug supplies helicoptered in from Christchurch to deal with the aftermath of the quake.
It's busy. Oh, I hate those things. Did you feel that?
A little bit.
Yeah. I'm over those.
So why are you so busy? Is it because there's more people in town or people are injured?
Initially, you know, we had a couple of thousand tourists here who commonly, you know, had enough prescription medication for the weekend, but come Monday they were due to go home, and of course they didn't have any drugs. So on top of all my local customers and clients who were due to be served on Monday, we had all of those tourists who didn't have any meds. So it's like dispensing the entire town in one go at once.
The main street supermarket, 4 Square, is also cordoned off. The Army and Fire Service have been working to secure the building. We're at the end of the main street now, and as you've seen as we've wandered up, most of the shops that are closed are the food ones because the sewage and water is still not working, but things like the clothes store, the chemist, the bank here and the dairy are all open. The ice cream shop right in front of us is planning to open next Monday if they can get enough supply of milk. And just around the corner, the last shop on the street is the fish and chip shop, which has been serving fish and chips to the locals for the last few days since the quake. Although the tourists are not here, the Army and emergency personnel are keeping the shops that are open busy for now. In Kaikōura's main street for Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
And we'll be back in Kaikōura and that road into it later. But before then, the government announces a sell-off of more than a third of its Housing New Zealand properties in Christchurch. We go there. The police appeal for the mother of the newborn baby found dead in an Auckland reserve. Please come forward, and much more before 6. Don't forget, we'd love to hear from you. You can text us 2101, email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. And we are, of course, on Twitter and Facebook. It's coming up to 27 minutes to 6, which means it's Katrina Batten time.
The Prime Minister says fear is starting to set in Kaikōura as the enormity of the situation there hits home. John Campbell visited the area today for the third time since last week's 7.8 magnitude quake to further assess damage and recovery efforts. He says the scale of the challenge ahead is daunting for some. The owner of a condemned Wellington office block at risk of collapse says his company was only trying to help by allowing a family to live there. The building on Molesworth Street was only meant to be used as office space, but at least one family was living there and now can't access their possessions. The chief executive of Prime Property, E.L. Aharoni, told Checkpoint the company was trying to help the family after another property they were renting was damaged by water. The police are urging the mother of a dead baby left in a South Auckland reserve to come forward. The body was found this morning by a man walking his dog through the reserve on Mona Avenue in Mangere Bridge. Detective Senior Sergeant Karen Bright says police have been making inquiries in the local area and a post-mortem will be done tomorrow. The Māori and Mana parties have formally agreed to develop their relationship ahead of next year's general election. The executives of both parties met in Whangarei today to discuss their future. The Māori Party President, Tuku Roirangi Morgan, says they'll focus on developing Māori politics and doing what is best for Māori. An Auckland lawyer accused of driving into a furniture removal man who was helping her ex-husband has been found guilty of dangerous driving causing injury. The Crown said Natalie Sharon Tabb failed to take all reasonable precautions when she reversed into Thomas McAndrew twice, leaving him with a broken finger and bruising to his hip. Ms Tabb's lawyers have indicated they'll be seeking a discharge without conviction. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks so much, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Giles Beckford, who beams in from Wellington, our business editor. Hi, Giles. You've been looking at a report that is looking at the 10 hottest growing spots in the country. Now, I haven't heard anything about this. What's the criteria and who's hot and who's not?
Generally speaking, the report focuses on population growth, John, and it's a case of who have had the strongest population growth, and therefore you extrapolate those gains and say, well, where they're likely to be the strong growth points for the future. It comes from the Infometrics Economics Consultancy. It's a bit of a think tank, and they've sat down and they've crunched the numbers and looked at where the population's been growing. It goes without saying, really, that the top spots go to Auckland, and they go to parts of Auckland, not just Auckland in general, which is what the rest of the country would think, but parts of Auckland. The ones that are mentioned are Beachlands Drury, Hobsonville, Central Auckland, Orewa Helensville. So from that point of view, those are seen to be the places that have got the strongest growth now and will have the strongest growth in the future. And with that, of course, comes the implication that there will be the demand for services, economic activity, consumer activity, house prices, construction services, the works. So the other parts of the country that do sneak in, and I have to say that Auckland occupies 4 of the 5 top spots. Southwest Christchurch, I don't know how big an area that is after the various quakes and liquefaction. Central Wellington, bits of Queenstown, a small bit of Whangarei, Marsden Point, they say in Whangarei, and a little bit around Queenstown and some suburbs, and Hamilton as well. So those are seen to be the thriving spots at the moment, and the implication being thriving spots for the future. Whether they're places to aspire to rush forward and get to settle there, I don't know. There could be places, in fact, to say that you wouldn't want to go there in the month of Sundays if they're that hot.
Guys, I was just looking at that list, Giles. So Southwest Christchurch, obviously there's a lot of post-quake activity out that way. Central Wellington, well, there's been quake activity there in the past week and a half. And I was thinking, have they assessed the impact of the earthquakes on Kaikōura and that area?
They did a postscript to the report, John, on Kaikōura and North Canterbury, South Marlborough. And a little bit about Wellington. The suggestion is, in fact, that judging by the experience after the Christchurch quakes, that Kaikōura could expect to lose perhaps up to 16% of its population. You think 16 out of every 100 people there. Now, there's only, a couple of thousand there generally, so that's quite a loss over the next couple of years for that area. Clearly, its future does rely upon the clearing up of the roads, getting safe, reliable access north and south. And they suggest, Infometrics does, that will probably take at best a year or more. And it means that the rest of the country will have to chip in, will have to keep supporting Kaikōura while those recovery efforts are underway and at least some level of reconstruction takes place.
Yeah, and support with getting tourists, encouraging tourists to go, in which the government's talking about a big marketing push. What happened on the markets today, Giles?
A positive day for the share market. Top 50 up 32 points at 6,883. The New Zealand dollar a shade on the soft side, and that's largely a reflection of the stronger US dollar. 69.8 US cents, and that's a 2-3 month low, and 94.8 Australian cents.
Giles Beckford, our business editor. Thanks, Giles. The government is attempting to breathe new life into its stalled plan to sell off thousands of state houses. It's announced it wants to sell just over a third of its Housing New Zealand stock in Christchurch to a private provider, promising the homes will continue to be rented to social housing tenants. One of the state houses on the block could end up being the one the Prime Minister grew up in, so much a part of his story and his life. Conan Young reports.
The government's plans to sell state houses in Invercargill and Horowhenua have fallen over, but now it's turning its attention to Christchurch. It's putting 2,500 homes up for sale in the suburbs of Riccarton, Shirley and Brindwa, and one of them could be John Key's old home on Hollyford Avenue. The current tenant declined to be interviewed, but another tenant, Katrina Burt, said Housing New Zealand did a lousy job of maintaining the home she shares with her 4 children. She's willing to give a new landlord a chance if it means getting things fixed in a more timely fashion.
During winter we asked them to come and do some things because we've had a lot of things that weren't done with the house and they kind of started not doing it till just now. We asked before winter. We had to have our kids sleep in the lounge because the rooms weren't warm, it was just too cold.
The government has just spent millions rebuilding or repairing state houses in the city's east and has no plans at this stage to sell these. But some of the houses up for sale have gone years without any money being spent on them. The minister responsible for Housing New Zealand, Bill English, evaded repeated questions around whether the government was simply hoping to flog off its old housing to somebody else to sort out.
We just want to see it redeveloped appropriately sooner rather than later. I mean, a lot of the state housing hasn't changed since the 1960s, and this is the best opportunity in a generation to redevelop some of these communities.
Bill English says a private provider would do a much better job of delivering the upgrade that Christchurch's housing stock needs.
Just the way government's operated, it's not that good at property development. It hasn't done it on a large scale for a long time. We're just trying to get more people involved.
The Methodist Mission's Jill Hawkey is opposed to state house sales and says the government should be taking responsibility for upgrading and maintaining its housing.
We'd rather see the government actually grow the sector rather than just shift houses from government control over to a community housing provider. There's no reason why the government can't do it as well as any private provider. It's just about, ensuring that you are a good landlord and look after the property wells and maintain them and then provide some social supports to some of the tenants who may need them.
The government's preference is to sell all 2,500 houses to a single provider. The most obvious purchaser is the Ototahi Community Housing Trust, which already manages close to 2,500 social housing units on behalf of the Christchurch City Council. Its chief executive, Kate Kearney, says it's early days, but she's definitely considering putting in an offer for the homes.
It's an opportunity potentially for the tenants in Housing New Zealand houses, because we do believe we've set up a model of tenancy management that puts the tenants at the centre and aims at, we hope, providing more service to the tenant than was previously provided.
The government will hold what it's calling a market sounding session with interested parties early in the new year and hopes to have a buyer confirmed by late next year. Whoever takes on the houses will sign a 25-year contract and will be required to retain them as social housing. They won't be able to on-sell them without the prior agreement of the government. In Ototahi for Checkpoint, ko Konanyang tēnei.
The police are still trying to identify the mother of a dead baby found in South Auckland this morning. A cordon's been in place at the Mona Avenue Reserve and Mangere Bridge since 8:30. Residents say the park is known as a popular party spot. Here's Alex Ashton.
Someone walking through the park, and the tiny body was taken away late this morning. The police haven't given any details about the baby's identity, including its sex or ethnicity. Detective Senior Sergeant Karen Bright says they're worried for the mother's well-being and are urging her to contact them.
Our priority right now is appealing to locate the baby's mother. We're really concerned for her well-being and we want to get her support and medical treatment. And for that reason, we ask that she contact us. She can contact any police station and she can speak to us in confidence.
Detective Senior Sergeant Karen Bright says a post-mortem will be carried out on the baby tomorrow.
We believe it is a recent birth, and that is why it is so important that we speak to the baby's mother, as she may well need some medical treatment.
This afternoon, the police spoke to residents living nearby. Melanie Keenan's lived opposite the reserve for 3 years. She's shocked.
I had no idea. It's only till now that I found out it was a baby, so yeah, but shocking. It's sad.
Andrew Fong lives right next to the cordon.
People dump dead cats, dead dogs, kittens, everything from TVs to couches, so it's a good place to dump stuff, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Both residents say they heard nothing unusual last night, but describe the reserve as a busy spot.
There are people parked up there all the time, but then we get the odd time we get loud music. So, yeah, but there's always somebody parked over there.
Quite often, in the evenings, to have a few drinks, there's quite often night parties as well.
The cordon was lifted late this afternoon. The priority for the police is now to find out who the baby is and how its body ended up in the reserve. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
It's coming up to 6:15. You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Equal pay for women is a step closer to becoming a reality today. The government is to change the law to make it easier for women to file pay equity claims with their employers rather than having to go through the courts. Laura Tupou reports.
Jenny Goodman has been working as a home-based support worker in Christchurch for 17 years. She says today's announcement is a breakthrough.
We think it's a positive because they've acknowledged that the principle of equal pay needs to be applied. And it was 18 months since Christine Bartlett and her case through the Employment Relations Court that brought this equal pay case about, and the government has sat on it for 18 months. So they've finally acknowledged that they're going to have to do something about it.
In 2014, Lower Hutt rest home worker Christine Bartlett successfully argued in the Employment Court that her hourly pay rate of $14.32 was gender discrimination. This prompted the creation of the joint working group led by Business New Zealand, the Council of Trade Unions and government representatives. The government announced today it has accepted the group's recommendations and has also decided to clarify how to choose an appropriate job for comparison when making a pay equity claim. Christine Bartlett says she's thrilled with the outcome and remains hopeful for what's next.
I'm glad this part's over. So the next part, I do feel confident. I've always felt confident because I just see that it just hasn't been fair. And, you know, it's got to be fair. And it's got to happen because that's just the way it should be.
The Employers and Manufacturers Association is part of the working group. Its General Manager of Advocacy and Industry Relations, Mark Champion, says it gives certainty around pay equity issues.
It's also a process that employers are comfortable with because it's a bargaining process rather than a legal challenge. And our employment relations is built on bargaining, good faith bargaining. And so this proposed solution, or at least the guidelines that the working group put forward to government, was very much in the good faith bargaining category.
The PSA's National Secretary, Erin Polachik, says the changes are a step forward when it comes to addressing pay equity issues.
So it makes it that much easier to start looking at equal pay problems, at the gap between women's and men's pay, and to start to address that. So yes, there's a lot of hard work to do and we're not there yet, but this is a great step forward for us.
Changes to the Equal Pay Act and the Employment Relations Act are needed to implement the recommendations, with the government expected to introduce a bill next year. Mō te hotaka o te ahiahi, ko Laura Tupou aho.
A loner obsessed with Nazis and extreme right-wing ideology has been sentenced to life in prison for the murder of British MP Joe Cox, who was killed in the lead-up to the Brexit referendum. I'm sure everyone remembers this. The jury took just 90 minutes to find 53-year-old Thomas Mair guilty. The judge said the murder was carried out to advance a political cause of violent white supremacism. This is from the ABC.
Inside London's Old Bailey, Joe Cox's family heard the news they had been waiting for, that the right-wing extremist who had murdered the much-loved Labour MP would spend the rest of his life in prison. Outside the court, Brendan Cox described the slaughter of his wife as an act of cowardice.
The killing of Joe was a political act, an act of terrorism. But in the history of such acts, it was perhaps the most incompetent and self-defeating. An act driven by hatred, which instead has created an outpouring of love. An act designed to drive communities apart, which has instead pulled them together.
During the trial, it emerged that Thomas Mair collected Nazi memorabilia, books on white supremacy, and newspaper clippings about Joe Cox. Mair shouted Britain first as he murdered the Labour MP. She had campaigned for Britain to remain in the EU and was an advocate for refugees and multiculturalism. Nick Wallen from West Yorkshire Police said Joe Cox paid the ultimate price for being a champion of democracy.
Thomas Mair is a cold-blooded killer. He calmly planned her death, he lay in wait, and then killed Joe in a sustained attack as she went about her daily business of trying to help people in her local community.
Thomas Mair did not speak in his defence at the trial. Because he refused to plead guilty, witnesses had to testify, reliving the trauma for family, friends and members of the Birstall community. Among them was eyewitness David Honeybell.
It stood over there from Bank Range, fired straight to the head. You could see about the angle of the gun, it was straight to the head.
In sentencing Thomas Mair, Justice Wilkie said he affected patriotism but was not a true patriot. The judge told Mair his inspiration came not from a love of country but an admiration of Nazism. Outside the court, Brendan Cox said that he and his family would never give in to the hatred and zealotry of his wife's murderer.
As a family, we will not respond to hatred with hatred. We will love like Joe did, and know that although she is dead, the ideas and values that she held so dear will live on. And know that although she is not with us, her energy and her love are hardwired into our children for the rest of their lives.
Labor leader Jeremy Corbyn said Mair had robbed the world of an ambassador for kindness and urged MPs to confront the hatred and division that led to her murder.
This morning at 6:30, a convoy of New Zealand Defence Force vehicles set off from Calverton to take the inland road to Kaikōura. Of course, no one takes the inland road unless they have to, and they have to because State Highway 1 is closed, and it will be closed for a long time, particularly to the north of Kaikōura. Civil Defences this afternoon said it will be at least a week before the inland road is open too, but the Army can go in, and they did in a convoy, and our reporter Maya Barry joined them, a journey that began with her leaving Christchurch at 3 a.m. First stop, Calverton.
I'm standing at the rugby club at School Road in Calverton. It's about 5:30 a.m, it's still pretty dark, and you might be able to hear the hum of New Zealand Defence Force trucks in the background. There are 31 of these trucks being used to ferry vital aid supplies to the seaside community of Kaikōura today. The plan for today is at about 6:30 a.m, so in about an hour, we're going to drive out of School Road, turn left and head down State Highway 7 until we take a right and turn off the highway until we end up in Waio. That's when things will start to get interesting. The Defence Force has told me this is a treacherous and testing route. Fault lines have sheared the road in half in many places. There are a lot of overhanging rocks and a number of bridges have also been damaged. Usually this 100-kilometre drive from Kaikōura would take about an hour and a half. Today it will take about 3.5 hours. The officer in charge of the team here, her name is Elaine Cowan, and she's in charge of 97 Defence Force staff.
On the trucks this morning we've got essential supplies such as these portaloos. We've got taking up 8,000 litres of petrol this morning, 12,000 litres of diesel, a lot of hospital stores which is essential equipment. Currently Kaikōura are really short on gas. We're sending up as many gas bottles as we possibly can to now allow them to cook. Generators also really important, so we have 2 generators going up this morning. A lot of fresh food, water and milk, and I can show you the rest if you want.
So what's this one here? It's got a trailer kind of unit on the back of the truck.
Another generator as well. So we're going up with obviously the drivers, and then everyone has to have a co-driver just for safety. And then we have a number of people who are going up to replace other pairs as well.
So I've just got in the truck, Convoy number 18, and I've found out who I'm sharing my ride with. So we've got the driver here.
Lance Corporal Brockwise.
And our co-driver.
Private Fisher.
Fantastic. And do you mind telling me what we're carrying today?
We're carrying a Tankology petrol system.
Is that thing pretty heavy?
Yeah, so it's about 3.5 tonne.
First convoy, first trip?
Yeah, from camp it is. It's my first trip out.
And what about you?
I've been up at Kaikōura and I've just come up here yesterday.
Fantastic. And first time driving?
Yeah.
Can I trust you?
I hope so. I hope I trust myself too.
Yeah. And what's your job as a co-driver?
My job is to just look out for potential threats like any marks on the road or anything that could obstruct the driver that he might not be able to see. Keep me awake. Keep him awake, play good music.
And we're about to get going now?
Yeah.
Yeah. just stopped at the top of Mount Lyford and all the trucks have pulled over, and in amongst the convoy there are also some residents. I've got one resident with me here. How's it going?
Yeah, no, pretty good, thanks. Nice morning.
Yeah. Where are you making your way to?
Oh, just into our B block. Yeah, just past Wales, back to Staggins Bay.
Over a week now since the quake, how have things been going?
Oh no, pretty good. A few frustrations. It's not brilliant timing for us, but you know, you make do. There's people with a heck of a lot worse off, so you don't worry about it too much.
And I'm not sure what the proper terminology is for this, but you've got some B boxes behind you, some empty B...
Yeah, no, but basically B boxes. It's pretty critical time for honey, so yeah.
And is that why you guys need to get through the area?
Yeah, yeah, no, we do. It's all pretty critical to get them on and get them making honey.
Yeah. Since passing through Mount Lyford, things have definitely got a lot hairier.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of damage to the roads and the surrounding area. The roads are falling to pieces, so...
I mean, massive landslides that obviously the contractors have been clearing.
Yeah, and just the roads themselves have got decent cracks and been separated quite a distance apart from each other, so...
And it looks like we've got another landslide coming up ahead of us.
Yeah, quite a big one.
I mean, some of the rocks we're driving past at the moment as big as that generator on the back of this truck, wouldn't you say?
It's ridiculous.
Looks a little bit like a war zone.
How the hell are they going to clear all this?
So we just went past a sign that said we're 47 kilometres away from Kaikōura, and I think what stands out the most at the moment, not only the significant landslips that there've been, but the fact that for every part of the road that's tar sealed, there's other parts that are now gravelled off, and obviously they weren't like that before this, and that just goes to show how busy contractors have been around here. And I'm sure this was once a really nice, scenic, relaxing drive that you took when you felt like, you know, taking the extra time to appreciate the view, but these days it's a bit less enjoyable, and just struggling to stay on my seat is the main thing I'm focusing on. We're just making our way down into the valley towards an overbridge, and you can just see at the bottom of the valley all the land that has just slipped there. There's just rockfall everywhere, and there is no road here anymore. It is more like a dirt track, I would say. We're trucking along the straight part of the inland road, and in front of me there's 7 convoy trucks, all carrying different things, pipes, generators, just like us, and we're getting closer and closer to the coast. Right, the truck has just stopped, and I'm getting out at the moment because we have made it to Kaikōura. Just getting myself down these steps that a bit higher than the car I usually get out of, and I'm down. So the convoy has parked up.
Who knows how many times we'll come through? We'll see.
Maya Burry doing stunning work. She arrived in Kaikōura at 1:30, 6.5 hours after leaving Kelvedon. The convoy was carrying fuel, portaloos, gas bottles, toiletries and other vital supplies. Let's go to Australia. They might be ours, but last night the Aussies inducted legendary Kiwi band Crowded House into the ARIA Hall of Fame. The band received Australia's highest musical honour at a star-studded event in Sydney, 30 years after receiving their first ARIA award for the classic song Don't Dream It's Over. Actually, I think that was a nomination. The ABC's Michael Edwards was there.
I'm really close tonight, and I feel like I'm moving inside her.
Two of Australia's biggest recording artists, Bernard Fanning and Missy Higgins, led the tributes to Crowded House with their versions of some of the band's biggest hits.
Somewhere deep inside, something's got a hold on you.
6 Crowded House albums have gone multi-platinum and millions know its songs by heart. And after more than 30 years at the top, the band was last night inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame. Neil Finn founded the band and wrote most of its memorable songs.
All over Australia, we've had amazing times with you people, and there's been a connection there, so we thank you all.
And eventually the band itself played, to the appreciation of an adoring audience.
The sounds of Crowded House ending that report from Michael Edwards. Is a funny one, that one. Obviously the Finns are as Kiwi as, but they were based in Melbourne for quite a long time, Katrina Batten. Maybe the Aussies can claim a little bit of them. The band was inducted by the Flight of the Conchords duo Jermaine and Brett, of course, wonderful New Zealanders who told the Australians, stop stealing our bands. Yeah, Australia.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The Prime Minister says fear is starting to set in Kaikōura as the enormity of the situation after last week's 7.8 earthquake hits home. John Key made a flying visit to the area today to further assess damage and recovery efforts. He says there's been some noticeable progress in clearing roads and slips, but the scale of the challenge ahead is daunting for some.
Just general fear about what might take place next. I mean, some of these people were in for a very long haul. If you take the power divers, they're talking about potentially having 5 or 6 years where it's quite a reduced amount of activity.
John Key says some people are also starting to battle with their insurance companies over quake claims. A Defence Force convoy of 32 trucks brought much-needed supplies into Kaikōura this afternoon. The town is still cut off to the public by road for the 10th day. Maya Burry reports.
Trucks carrying gas bottles, portaloos, petrol and baked beans arrived in Kaikōura this afternoon after a 6-hour trip through the inland route. The trucks dropped supplies at the local supermarket, hospital and petrol stations in their 4th and largest trip on the road, which is closed to the public. The Kaikōura racecourse, which has been turned into an army barracks, was a hive of activity as the army prepared for their return journey. It's not yet clear when the next convoy will be able to come, with the weather already turning for the worse. At the Kaikōura racecourse, Maya Burry.
Work is to begin tomorrow morning on repairing earthquake damage to Wellington's biggest office block, the Asteron Centre. The Inland Revenue Department evacuated 2,000 staff from the building yesterday and this afternoon told them they wouldn't be back for 2 weeks. The building's owner, Mark Denichik, will have repair work to the building's staircases carried out over that period. He says safety concerns raised by IID's engineers are overblown, but they'll get on with the work anyway.
It is an absolute waste of time to indulge in an academic argument. My focus is absolutely on doing some remedial work on which I spent most of this today, and we probably will start with the active work tomorrow morning.
Mark Denichik emphasises the engineers found no evidence of structural damage to the building. The owner of a condemned Wellington office block that had people living in it illegally has confirmed another of its office buildings has residential tenants. Demolition of the prime property-owned high-rise at 61 Molesworth Street started this afternoon because it's at risk of collapse after the earthquake. It's been revealed at least one family was renting space from Prime to live there. Prime's Chief Executive E.L. Aharoni told Checkpoint it has previously also rented space for people to live in a building it owns in Wakefield Street, but he says there are no residential tenants there now. Mr. Aharoni admits mistakes may have been made, but he says the company was only trying to help the family living in Molesworth Street. An inmate who pinched a prison guard's bottom is the first to be sentenced for a third strike offence since the controversial law passed 6 years ago. In the High Court in Hamilton today, Justice Toogood sentenced Raven Casey Campbell to the maximum 7 years for indecently assaulting the woman guard. However, he did not impose parole. Campbell had already received strike warnings for robbery and aggravated robbery. While at Waikeria Prison, he assaulted the guard, constituting a third strike offence. Justice Toogood said the 25-year-old had been impulsive and foolish, had pleaded guilty and was remorseful for what he had done. The judge said he found it harsh to sentence Campbell to the maximum 7 years, but he had no option because that was the law. He said to sentence him without parole would be manifestly unjust. The housing trust set up by the Christchurch City Council could be interested in buying up to 2,500 state houses. The government wants to sell just over a third of its properties in the city to a private provider, promising the homes will continue to be used for social housing. They're in the suburbs of Riccarton, Shirley and Brindwa and could include John Key's old family home. The chief executive of the Ototahi Community Housing Trust, Kate Kearney, says it's early days, but she's definitely considering putting forward an offer for the houses. Costa Rica has declared a national state of emergency as a hurricane approaches its Caribbean coast. Several thousand people in the direct path of Hurricane Otto have been told to leave their homes, and government offices have been ordered to stay shut for 2 days. Southern Nicaragua is also in the path of the storm. Forecasters say it's unusual to see such a powerful hurricane this late in the Atlantic storm season, and it's also rare for one to hit Costa Rica. It's 6:05. To sport, and All Blacks coach Steve Hansen has made a number of changes to his side for their final test of the year against France in Paris on Sunday morning. TJ Perenara starts at halfback, Ryan Crotty and Anton Leonard-Brown are together in the midfield, Waisaki Naholo starts on the right wing and Israel Dag drops back to fullback. In the forwards, Jerome Kaino returns from injury and Matt Todd starts for the injured Sam Cane. New Zealand batsman Ross Taylor says he's aware another cheap dismissal in the second cricket test against Pakistan could raise questions about whether his eye condition is to blame. Taylor's been cleared to play the match at Seddon Park, which starts tomorrow, but he'll undergo surgery next week to remove a growth on his left eye that's affecting his vision. He says it's been a bit of a distraction, but mentally rather than physically.
Mentally, I guess, when you play and miss your first couple of balls after seeing an optometrist. There's some interesting things that go through your mind. So I can't worry about it. I'm going out there to bat and give my best with the bat and then slip called. I can't really worry about what if.
Ross Taylor. The New Zealand golfers Danny Lee and Ryan Fox are in 26th and last place nearing the end of the first day of the World Cup of Golf in Melbourne. And boxing fans will have to pay $60 to see Joseph Parker's WBO heavyweight title fight against Andy Ruiz on pay TV next month. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a brief history of pirates, the role they played in imperial expansion, what happened when they reached their imperial use-by date, and where they are now. The Kiwi-born British-based Simon Leighton has the story. We investigate the science of snow, and this week's cultural ambassador Kirsten Zemke looks back at the big hip-hop tracks of 2016 on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Taumaranui, including the central high country. Cloudy periods, showers developing overnight, turning to rain tomorrow morning with some heavy falls possible, clearing in the afternoon. Bay of Plenty, showers developing tomorrow morning, turning to rain in the afternoon, then gradually clearing. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy tomorrow with a few spots of rain. Taranaki to Wellington, also Wairarapa, Nelson and Marlborough. Mostly cloudy, a period of rain around midday tomorrow. Showers in the North Island areas in the evening. Bulla to Fiordland, occasional rain becoming persistent tomorrow with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Canterbury and Otago, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle. A period of scattered rain tomorrow morning, then mostly fine. Southland, scattered rain, clearing, then returning for a time tomorrow morning. And the Chatham Islands, cloud increasing, rain developing tomorrow afternoon. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. By now, Kaikōura should be hitting its peak season. Whale watching, swimming with the dolphins, bars and restaurants buzzing, the no vacancies signs starting to go out. Now, we all know, of course, that that is not the case. After the winter hibernation, the earthquakes have stopped the town coming back to life. How are businesses coping? Well, with the wit and support and a singular will, they are somehow getting by just. They do need the government support package. That runs out in 8 weeks. What will happen then and how are they now? Well, 5 of them joined us via live view, one after another. We begin with the town's sole pharmacist, David McKee. He found himself with a town full of people, many stuck there and staying longer than they'd expected, some running out of drugs and having no prescriptions for replacements. He had to make it work, and somehow he has. But as the only person in town able to do it, he's exhausted.
Oh, I'm 6 or 7 stages above buggered. Yeah, thank goodness for beer. Beer is a wonderful substance. You know, you've still got to do the evening sit down with a few of your mates and have a pint, because if you don't, I think you come to bits. You know, this is a social town. It's an incredibly well networked town, and if it weren't for some of my friends around me in these sorts of situations, then yeah, I would have come to bits days ago.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a few people like that in Kaikōura. Can we talk about the road just before I ask you to pass on the phone and the microphone? You know, sure. Once again, it's delayed, the inland route. It could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 3 weeks. What impact has that news had on the town? I'm not so sure about the entire town. I've really been entirely focused upon our the town's pharmaceutical needs, and yep, you know, the road's critical to our psyche and our long-term survival. That road simply has to be open. There is no question about that. If we turn into a you know, a Karamea situation, one road in, one road out, you can say goodbye to most of Kaikōura. But if we can get that road open both ways, it's the passing traffic which is keeping Kaikōura alive and has done for decades, and that needs to continue. Our own urgent needs, I get stuff flown in, but it would just be a whole lot easier if I didn't have to manage, you know, our own needs, things like nappies. I've got a 1-year-old, so we need nappies. When the town runs out of nappies, yeah, the shit does hit the fan. So having the road open just prevents all of that drama that you've got going on in the background, that if you're not experiencing it, you never even consider. So yeah, get the road open. I mean, my car is in desperate need of a service, and it can't be done here. It's a foreign thing, and it needs new tyres, and I can't get them shipped in. So I've got to get to Christchurch at some stage in the next month or two. And if the road isn't open, I'm going to have to, I don't know what we're going to do. Thanks, Dave. It's lovely to talk to you.
I'll work that out when that comes along.
Keep up the very good work there. Would you mind passing on the phone and the microphone to the person sitting beside you? We're very grateful. So for people listening, what we've got is a group of Kaikōura business people sitting around a table, and we're going to the next one now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello, it's lovely to talk to you.
Yes,
this is a very rude question because we've just met, and I'd like to be polite about it. What's your name and what's your business?
So my name is Mel Skinner, and I run SS Wine Company in Kaikōura.
Right, and are you open or closed?
We are open. Luckily, we didn't have a building itself. We had all our wine in a cellar and sell online and through the farmers market, and sell outside of Kaikōura as well. So we've been really lucky that all the wine has survived, and we only lost one bottle that happened to be sitting on my kitchen bench.
How extraordinary. What about customers? Have you got any?
Yes, we have. We definitely have customers here. We're working with a number of local businesses at the moment, making sure they're stocked up. So and we've always had good support from restaurants such as Celaview. Hapuku Lodge has always supplied our wine as well, and now working with new customers here, and then also out of Kaikōura as well.
And so how are you coping? You actually sound to me like you're doing remarkably well.
We are. I mean, we've had really good support from a lot of businesses, and businesses we haven't worked from before. We were lucky enough this morning to get some wine sent out with Rodfather fishing tours. That was taking people back down to Oaro, so they've been helping us out. We've also had building companies also helping us with chillers as well. So we had Alistair Braun helping us with that as well.
Thanks, Mel. I'm very impressed by your resilience, and your ability to keep a wine business open in an earthquake zone is remarkable. Would you mind passing me on to whoever's beside you? Thank you, Mel.
I certainly will.
Thank you very much. Hello, it's John speaking. Who's this?
This is Dwayne Fussell. I'm the owner of Coastal Sports in town here.
So you're a retailer, Dwayne?
Yes, yeah, we've got an adventure sports store here. We sell surfboards, bikes, adventure gear, camping gear.
And did you survive the earthquake? And two, if you did, do you have any customers to sell stuff to?
I mean, I'm in that tricky situation where my shop actually did survive fairly well. We've opened the doors pretty quickly. Going forward, yeah, most of our customers locked out of town at the moment. We'd really love them back.
Because have you basically got no income at all at the moment?
We've been surprised how well we've been supported online. We do have an online business as well, and we are finding a huge amount of support around the country to help us to get through this. Certainly our income's been cut massively, but we are getting parcels out on helicopters and planes and boats and whatever way we can to people.
So you are running an online business from a community completely cut off from the outside world, other than by helicopter. This is, people talk about resilience. It's possibly the most overused word in the English language after an earthquake, but by golly, that's an example of it.
Yeah, we've been throwing stuff at everybody that's leaving town and just getting it down to my father in Christchurch, and he's getting it to the depot. He's been a good man down there.
Well, congratulations, and keep up the almost miraculous work. Who have you got beside you, Dwayne? Can you pass the phone over?
Yep, no worries.
Thank you, bro. Is that you, Daniel?
That's right. How are you, John?
Dan, yeah, good. So for people who were listening, Daniel, you were one of the first business owners we spoke to. See, you're Kaikōura cheese, right? I recognise you. So you have a cheese business for which you need milk and you need customers, and you kind of have neither, but somehow you're making a go of it, are you, Daniel?
That's right. We're still working towards getting up and running again as quick as we can. And we've got a lot of cheese that survived the earthquake, and we've been working pretty hard and fast to get our cheese out of Kaikōura. So once again, Anton from the Rodfather and Cam from Growan, they got our cheese down the coast today on the boat, and now it's zip-zapping all over the country. Have some cheese up in your way by tomorrow, I think.
So if we look at the people I've met so far, we've got a pharmacist who's somehow managing to get drugs in. We've got a wine seller who has somehow managed to keep her cellar intact and distribute wine. We've got a sports goods retailer who is somehow managing to run an online business from there. And we've got you who is somehow managing to get cheese out. And actually, when I think about that, it's remarkable.
It is phenomenal, and it's just an amazing expression of humanity, and it's just so lovely to see it in action. And with some of these sort of support things that are happening within Kaikōura and outside, it'd be really nice to see them continue.
Yeah.
Like the farmers market yesterday was outstanding. People coming together, people pulling over and checking if you're all right. If we can keep some of this in Kaikōura, if we can keep Sounds Air in Kaikōura coming, every day, things like this, if we can keep that good humanity happening, I think Kaikōura is going to really become even more of a special place.
What a nice thought, humility and humanity. It's a lovely thought. Thank you, Daniel. It's really nice to talk to you again. Would you mind, in this lovely relay we've got of our phone and our microphone, passing the baton along? Who have you got beside you?
So we've got Fiona beside us. I'll put her on.
Thank you so much. I have to say, everyone is... Fiona, I was just about to say this on the radio, and I'm going to say it to you. Thank you for joining us. Everyone is in remarkably good spirits, but actually some of the people I've spoken to look a bit tired, and that's no surprise at all. How are you going? What's your business, and how are you coping?
Well, our business is Haupuku Lodge and Tree Houses. We're just north of town, a luxury lodge.
The lodge itself was in great shape. A few, cosmetic repairs required and minor things like water to sort out. But personally, yeah, I'm good, but I am tired. I think there's a lot of people feeling the same way. Some of us, haven't had time to eat, to be honest. We sort of got up early. We've just been go, meetings, catching up with people, insurance talks, all that kind of thing. And, we really actually have to start looking after ourselves. I know it's easy to say, but, yeah, pretty tired.
Yeah. And you would have had bookings, obviously, because we're going into peak season now. Are those people going to be able to get to you, and do they still want to come?
Well, yes and no. There's a real mix, to be honest. I mean, we're not currently open. We've got a few things to sort out. We've set ourselves an ambitious aim, but we have to aim high. So we've set ourselves a goal of being open by the 1st of December. But there's a real mix. Yes, of course, we've had cancellations. There are some people that aren't that comfortable coming to an earthquake area, and we completely understand that. But actually, on the other side, we've had inquiries and we've had bookings from December right through until March. So it's a mixed bag at the moment, and we're just sort of taking each day as it comes, really, and assessing where we're at.
Kaikōura business owners making an extraordinary and admirable fist of it in the circumstances. As we know, the road is closed, their customers can't get to them, but somehow they are getting to their customers. We will be back in Kaikōura tomorrow night. Let's talk some sport now with the time at 6:20 on RNZ. In fact, it's 6:20 everywhere in New Zealand, isn't it? Not just on RNZ. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen has made a number of changes to his side for Sunday morning's final test of the year against France in Paris. Yes, non-rugby people, the rugby season will be over in about 72 hours. His hand has been forced by suspension, injury and form. Jerome Kano and Matt Todd come into the forward pack, and TJ Perenara, Ryan Crotty and Waisaki Naholo into the back. Sports reporter Barry Guy is in our Wellington studio, smiling away. Barry, how are you?
I'm not too bad, John. Yeah, we're surviving.
Yeah, good.
Got some rugby to look forward to.
Yeah, well, we've talked a lot about Kaikōura, but you are, and all the RNZ team are working on the terrace there, and it shakes and rattles that building you're in, doesn't it? How are you coping?
Not too bad. I've seemed to have missed most of the quakes here in the building. Plenty at home, though. Live in an old villa which shakes and just a bit of wind, really. So, we rock and roll quite a bit. But we're doing pretty well, actually.
Go Wellington. Let's talk about this team. Steve Hansen's hand was forced, particularly interested in the Aaron Smith versus TJ Perenara thing. In short, this is a form selection, isn't it?
That's right. Last week against Ireland, Aaron Smith started pretty well, but he had a couple of errors, and with the All Blacks now, there was that high kick that sort of more or less went straight up and a couple of issues. Steve Hansen, of course, is going to say that it's a confidence thing, and of course, to get your confidence back, you have to be playing, but really TJ Perenara is playing better at the moment. And so, Aaron Smith was the best halfback in the world just 2 months ago, and so he really just needs to keep playing and come off the bench and that sort of thing, and he'll be back to his best. But yeah, you'd have to say TJ Perenara, after that sort of finishing run of the Hurricanes and then into the international season, would have to be the number one at the moment.
Look, I say this as a Hurricanes man, and no disrespect to Aaron Smith at all, but boy, it was amazing to watch him grow in confidence, because remember, he ended up the number 3 halfback in the World Cup squad for the All Blacks last year, so he had fallen down the picking order, and it's been a pretty remarkable display of tenacity by him to, as we stand anyway, and we all know that Aaron Smith is a remarkable player, be number 1 in the All Blacks picking list.
Well, it's just the way I think of New Zealand rugby and the All Blacks. Stephen Luatua, he was given a chance, having not played for them for a couple of years, and he had a great game. Italy, was it, I think. It's just the way it is, and I think because the All Blacks work so well together and they're helping each other, that you're not sort of left out of the the loop in any way. And what can you do? Beauden Barrett, at the start of the season, you wouldn't have picked Beauden Barrett to be the number 1. It would have had Aaron Smith. It's just a great setup, and who knows what will happen next year.
That internal competition is extraordinary.
Yeah, just fantastic.
I was thinking, I know that there are surprisingly to me, there are people on the planet who don't really like rugby. And so they will be sick to death of it. And there is good cause because it is an insanely long season. The Super competition started in February. These guys have been playing for 10 months without a break. Now, this is a game that takes a toll on your body. And I thought they were looking slightly buggered against Ireland, particularly in that game in Chicago. Will they be able to rise to the occasion against France?
I agree with you. I think on the whole end of year tour, they've looked to be a bit like that. And I wrote a column on the RNZ website earlier this week to say the same thing. There have been a lot of critics of Kieran Reid also, that he's not just the not dynamic player he used to be. And I think also he is needing a break. Of course, he's going to take a longer break and miss the start of the Super Rugby season. And I bet you there's a few other guys that are thinking, well, I wish I had a few more weeks off to go to the beach perhaps or whatever. This is the 14th test for them this year. They played a really long Super Rugby season, so people will say, you get those critics that you've only played a few games of rugby. What is it? It's a professional game, but I think it has taken its toll mentally as well.
So wait a sec, this is their 14th test, and they play
test this season.
Yeah, allowing for rests and injuries and all that kind of stuff. They're probably playing 13, 14, 15 super games, the senior players, right?
Yeah.
So
training
they
6 days a week.
Yeah. So they're getting. I mean, I know that people on a minimum wage job who are sweating just to get by envy this lifestyle. But in terms of the impact on your body, playing 30 really top games of rugby means you get to this stage in the year and you are, I suspect, just quietly completely over it.
That's right. The NFL, they play 16 regular season games, maybe 19 if you make the playoffs. Football's different. They play 40 or 50, don't they? But it does take a toll. It's such a physical game, and especially the way the All Blacks played. They showed it last weekend against the Irish, how physical it is. It's going to take a toll. So the French are going to be up this weekend. Of course, they lost to a second-string Wallabies side last weekend, but they're going to be up because, they're the French and they always do well against the All Blacks. And that's why the All Blacks have picked such a good team, because, they want to finish on a high.
Barry, sorry, we've got to finish this story about Donald Trump, so you've got to answer this question in less than a minute. Had France got that drop goal over last week, they would have beaten Australia. They look like a French team that's finding its feet. Will this be a close game?
For the first 60 minutes, like it always is.
Barry, guy. Don't you
22-12.
Young man. Oh, yeah, okay. Thanks, Barry.
See you, John.
Nice to talk to you. I'll be watching. One of the few people in the world who is heartbroken when the rugby season ends. It's 26 minutes past 6. Donald Trump has named one of his sharp critics to take a place at his cabinet table as he announces the appointment of 2 women to his new administration. Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina and the daughter of Indian immigrants, will be the next US ambassador to the UN. She's no foreign policy experience, but her selection has been met with sighs of relief from within the UN. From New York, here's the BBC's Nick Bryant.
South Carolina makes presidents, and that our next president will be Marco Rubio.
Nikki Haley became prominent during this campaign as a critic of Donald Trump. During the Republican primary, she first supported the Florida Senator Marco Rubio and then backed the Texan Ted Cruz.
I wanted somebody that had conviction to do the right thing.
This daughter of Indian immigrants was critical of Mr. Trump's proposed ban on Muslims entering the United States and the incendiary tone of his anti-immigrant rhetoric.
During anxious times, it can be tempting to follow the siren call of the angriest voices. We must resist that temptation.
Following the election, though, this high-flying 44-year-old, the youngest governor in America, was earmarked for a high-profile role.
While I won't pretend to have always been President-elect's biggest cheerleader, I did vote for him, and I was absolutely thrilled to see him win.
Thank you, South Carolina. It's coming down.
As governor of South Carolina, she's best known for demanding the lowering of the Confederate flag at the state capitol in Columbia after the shooting of 9 African Americans at this church in Charleston.
The Confederate flag is coming off the grounds of the South Carolina State House.
It was a brave political move in such a staunchly conservative state and a high point in what's been an eye-catching career. But as she prepares to represent the United States at the United Nations in New York and occupy the ambassador's office at its UN mission, little is known about her approach to foreign affairs. Diplomats from other countries have expressed relief at the appointment of Nikki Haley. They fear that Donald Trump might appoint a prominent Republican UN basher to the role. They also see her as a potentially moderating influence on the incoming president.
That's Nick Bryant. The other appointment announced by the Trump transition team was Betsy DeVos. The staunch Conservative Republican Party donor and charter school advocate will become Mr Trump's education secretary. She's seen as a national leader in the so-called school choice movement. Her family is also heir to the Amway Corporation fortune. We are coming up to the end of Checkpoint tonight. We've received some really lovely feedback about Kaikōura. Lots of people who just are saying, well done and stick with it down there, or up there, obviously, if you're communicating from further south than Kaikōura. Let's read out some examples. Maybe someone should set up a community website that all of New Zealand can access so other Kiwis can buy online from Kaikōura businesses to offer support. Sounds Ears flies in and out daily, so can transport smaller goods, says Sally from Wellington. Thanks, I think that's a really good idea, and we'll find out if something along those lines is happening and let you know tomorrow night. And we spoke to Kaikōura businesses who are somehow existing despite the fact their customer base isn't there. So they're managing somehow to get their goods out to the rest of the country in the absence of that road, of course. And this very kind person says we should all support these businesses like the cheese guy, the sports guy, etc. Hear, hear. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for listening. We're delighted to have your company. It's coming up to 6:30. That's us for tonight, but it's Thursday, so we'll be back tomorrow. And we look forward to being with you from 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister says fear is starting to set in Kaikōura as the enormity of the situation and likely long recovery from last week's 7.8 earthquake hits home. Demolition of a quake-damaged office block on Molesworth Street in Wellington has begun this afternoon. The police in Auckland are searching for the mother of a baby found dead in a Mangere Bridge Park. And Donald Trump has admitted that the United States presidential election has unleashed tensions, but says the time has come for national unity. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Suzanne takes you down to her place near the river.
The passing of songwriter Leonard Cohen just last week was hardly a surprise, but no less a loss. And in this week's New Horizons, I'll be looking over the Canadian's career.
But that's why you want